Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Hokage Naruto build harem with Ino Sakura and Tsunade Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. Now let's start the fanfic. Valley of the End was a treacherous and dreadful place located on the borders of two significant villages of the elemental nations, Konohagakure and Otogakure. The valley was a result of a spectacular battle that the forefathers of Konoha fought on its soil. That battle was beyond everything else. It was both magnificent and gruesome as it pushed both the participants to utilize all the power they possessed. Not only did the battle ease their strength but also their devotion and belief they had for their ultimate motive. Since then the valley came to be known as a symbol of both war and peace. One side of the ravine represented peace while the other one represented war. For countless years, the place remained untouched by any sort of pandemonium and continued to be a location one would travel to reminisce about the power their ancestors possessed. But everything changed when the wild war decided to repeat itself today. Two great shinobis, one named Uzumaki Naruto while the other named Uchiha Sasuke, clashed on the soil of the valley, destroying everything that came into their path. Stones, trees, lakes, and even the great statues of the valley, nothing was left untouched by the destruction. Blow after blow, the valley suffered from the intense power of those two shinobi. Their dance of death continued for hours before finally coming to an abrupt end when the blonde-haired shinobi decided to finish their conflict, once and for all. Goodbye, my friend, Sasuke. Rasengan. A small blue ball of pure energy began to swirl violently in the right palm of the blonde boy. Haha, even in the end, you cannot call me your enemy, Naruto. The small laughs of the Uchiha deluged the valley in their warmth. Drip, drip, drip. Tears, countless precious white tears stained the cold ground of the valley. I don't want to kill you, Naruto whispered, his feet resting on the bloodied chest of Sasuke. The laughs eventually died down. Then don't. No one is forcing you, Naruto. Quote. Bruised lips curved upwards in a tiny smirk. You don't have anyone left who can love you now, Naruto. Jiraiya is dead and I think that Senju will probably die in a while too. So, I'm asking you again, why are you so reluctant to save this world? This woe. Sasuke hesitated as a violent cough waddled his whole body with discomfort. This world has nothing for you now. Let me destroy it. I will remodel everything again. I will create a world where no one has to suffer. A world where everyone will be happy. A world where you can even have that annoying Sakura. Allow me to accomplish that, Naruto. His words did nothing. Naruto remained as silent as he was before his speech. You are a fool, Sasuke. Sasuke scowled, his eyes exhibiting pure sorrow and pity for his one and only friend. Then end my life because I promise you, Naruto. If you let me live today, then sooner or later I will destroy this world. This world deserves nothing but pain for ruining our lives. The people in this world will die. Everything came to a halt when the sound of the swirling vortex died down with the breaths of Sasuke Uchiha. Quote. Wide blue eyes lost themselves in despair. It all happened in the blink of an eye. On one second the Rasengan was swirling in his palm and on another it was peeling off the skin from his friend's body. Sasuke. His heart skipped a beat. Sasuke. A strange feeling began to churn inside him when the boy didn't even twitch. Naruto. The dread inside him chilled his whole body when his ears picked up the voice of his other teammate, Sakura. Sasuke. His head refused to turn around even when the girl shrieked in horror. There was no need, after all. He already knew what was going on in her mind. The sadness, the pain, and the cracks in her voice, he could already feel them without even looking at her. I killed him. Everything stopped. A few months later. Naruto. A pair of heterochromatic eyes snapped open and turned a little towards the entrance of the room in which their possessor, Naruto, was sleeping. Everything was blurry. he idly noted as he found it hard to adjust his eyes to the morning light. Ino, he whispered, not sure if he was right at the guess. Of course, stupid. Her familiar sweet and warm voice reached his ears and soon a small smile materialized on his dry lips. Wake up, Naruto. Tsunade has called for your presence, O almighty hero of the war. The teasing in her voice was as apparent as the Rinnegan in his right eye, though unlike her teasing it was still subtly shrouded behind his hair. Okay, Ino-sama. Raising his arms high in the air, he let out a cute yawn, one that perished too soon from his mouth when he noticed something fascinating. You're becoming more and more beautiful with each passing day, Ino. What the hell are you eating? A forbidden fruit like that Kagaya lady? He asked her, completely missing the full blush that covered her cheeks soon after he finished his words. Then again, it was still dark in the corner where she was standing, so being able to see anything there seemed impossible. I don't use any jutsu. Ino's stuttering didn't go unnoticed by him though. Beauty runs in my blood, Naruto, and I can understand why you are enamored by it. Her bright contagious smile made him smile too. Also, if you want to compliment me, then do it while looking into my eyes. That way, I'll feel more special. Naruto snorted lightly. Compliment you, blah, as if I'll ever do that. He let his words hang in the air as he stood up from his soft mattress and began to arrange them appropriately on the shelves beside. I still think you are using a jutsu, Ino. Otherwise, there is no way you can continue to become so beautiful. His eyes finally turned back to her and soon, a giggle left his mouth when she abruptly closed the distance between them. Now that she was sitting close to him, he could clearly see the red on her cheeks, and surprisingly it looked pretty good there. Ino huffed in annoyance and positioned her hands under her S, pushing them up a bit. If the boy was going to tease her like that for nothing, then she might as well tease him back too. What do you think about my S, Uzumaki? They are amazing, right? She asked him, only to get completely ignored by her friend. Glancing up, she groaned when she saw him leering at her S. Naruto, she sighed, looking very disappointed for some reason. What? You told me to give feedback on them, and for that, I need to examine them first. Ino's eyes twitched a little. Examine what? You didn't even touch them. Have you finally gone insane, Naruto? She couldn't help but ask him. The Uzumaki boy firmly denied her statement. Nope. I'm completely fine, Lady Yamanaka. He answered her. I'm just trying to copy Ero Sennin. That idiot somehow always used to guess the right size. With that said, he slipped even closer to the girl. What is your size, Ino? If it was a few months ago, then Ino would have pummeled him to the ground for even daring to ask such a silly and absurd question, but this Ino, the one who was sitting right in front of him, was way different than the Ino of the past. After the war got over, Naruto was left with nothing but horrible memories of that event. It was an event that he thought had changed him forever. That war took away everything from him, his smile, his confidence, and especially his best friend. Sasuke Uchiha's demise affected him in ways he couldn't even explain. He was his best friend, one whom he adored to no end, but that war took him away from him. With him gone, his other friend, Sakura, was left broken, so much that she broke all the ties with everyone, including him, her best friend. The day she severed those bonds was the day Naruto's heart shattered completely. He lost his will to live, to exist in the world that had brought him nothing but pain. All the miseries and anguish of the past finally got to his brain and deteriorated it for good. His mental health degraded so much that everyone around him began to worry about him and the potential thought of losing the hero of the war. So, in order to save his sanity, the Hokage, his beloved Ba-chan, decided to designate a nurse for him. At first, he thought the medic would be someone unknown, but his Ba-chan really surprised him by selecting none other than the heiress of the Yamanaka clan, Ino Yamanaka, as his nurse. Naruto wouldn't lie, the first weeks of his treatment were horrible, even more than how he had initially imagined they would be in the worst-case scenario. Ino barely used to express anything, not even a proper greeting. For her, giving him his medicines and submitting a small report about his health to Tsunade were the main objectives of her duty. She used to visit him, give him correct medicine, remain with him for a while, and then leave, without even saying a single word sometimes. After noticing her behavior for a few weeks, Naruto realized that she would never talk to him as she was Sakura's best friend and one of the many girls who used to adore Sasuke. For a few days, his presumption remained precise as everything went on as usual, till one fateful day she finally made an effort to start a conversation with him. It wasn't a long conversation but was more than enough to warm his heart again as it meant she had started to forgive him. Double D. Ino's declaration brought him out of his trance and soon he found himself staring at her beautiful face. Double D. He asked her and moved his eyes towards her huge S that were resting under her blouse proudly. Liar. A small pout flickered on his lips, one that held an ample amount of disappointment to irritate her. Ino was as red as a habanero now. I'm not lying, Naruto. Can't you see my S? They are right in front of you. Look at them, she exclaimed at him and heaved her S even closer to his face. Seriously, what was wrong with her friend? Couldn't he just accept the fact that she was the most beautiful female he had ever seen? She fumed internally. Unfortunately, Naruto totally ignored her struggles and began to walk towards his washroom. Hey dumbass, where are you going? To my washroom. Why? I want to masturbate while thinking about your S, Ino. Can't do it in front of you. All the colors vanished from her beautiful face as soon as she heard him utter those shockingly obscene words. Masturbate. She screeched loudly with a red face, now trying her best to cover up her body from his hungry eyes. She never thought her teasing would push him to do something as bold as that. Naruto almost slumped to the ground and groaned at the silliness of his friend. I was joking, Ino. He mumbled. Why would I masturbate thinking about you? There was no reason for him to do anything like that. She was his friend, and friends never think about each other in that way. He had learned that very well from Sakura. I don't know, maybe you have finally started to fall in love with me, Naruto. You can never be sure, you know. He blinked at her with amusement shimmering in his eyes. Leave it to Ino if you wanted to see an amazing example of self-love. His silly and beautiful friend was a living embodiment of it. I can never fall in love with anyone, Ino. Love is something I don't desire anymore. It's useless. He whispered and finally closed the door of his washroom. Ino remained silent at that. You will eventually find someone again, Naruto. A faint murmur escaped her rosy lips. Ooh, the trip to the Hokage office was fairly interesting if Naruto was to be believed. From getting looks of appreciation from everyone to being surrounded by hordes of fangirls, he welcomed everything with a tiny grateful smile on his face. The same couldn't be said for his friend Ino though. The girl absolutely hated the whole trip to the office. Neither did she like the fake admiration of the stupid civilians nor did she enjoy the fits of those horny fangirls. They were all infuriating in her eyes. Why were they ing you so much? Why didn't you resist? She asked him the same question for the 1000th time that day. Naruto glanced at her for a second. They were just trying to express their admiration for me, Ino. You don't have to be so mad about it. His words fell on deaf ears as the girl continued to utter curses towards those cheap fangirls. They could have shown their admiration while staying away from you, Naruto. They didn't have to come so close to you. Your mental health has only started to improve recently and I don't want it to get worse again because of some stupid fangirls. Ah, you are so caring and wonderful, Lady Yamanaka. Sometimes I can't help but envy the guy who'll get to marry you in the future, you know. Ino stopped her stride. Really? For a second something precious flickered within her eyes but before Naruto could notice, it disappeared. I'm honored to hear that you think so highly of me, but sadly, no one loves your lil ol Yamanaka, Naruto. She grumbled. Whether it was negligence or intentional, Naruto chose not to respond to the last part of her statement. Instead, He scowled at her in fake anger. Peef. They're all idiots then. You are one of the coolest girls I have ever met, Ino. You're kind, caring, and your beauty has no match. Not even Sakura can compete with you. He exclaimed, thrashing his hands erratically in the air to overdramatize the whole statement. Even more than Sakura, the girl narrowed her eyes at him. Naruto didn't waste any time in answering her question. Of course, she is no match for you, Ino. She might be beautiful and all, but. He trailed off as his eyes wandered over to her face. You, raising his hand, he moved it closer to her face. Are an angel to me, Ino, and gently tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. Then why don't we marry each other? Naruto faltered on his feet. His eyes widened, not believing what he just heard. I said, why don't you marry me then? Explosions of red covered his whole cheeks. His tongue fumbled inside his mouth, and for the next few seconds, his poor mind tried to come up with a reasonable excuse but failed to do so. Defenseless, he was about to say something stupid but couldn't when his mouth was sealed closed by a single finger on his lips. Shish, the mirth in her eyes was striking, something that made him even more nervous. I was just joking, Naruto. And the distance they had between them was long gone. Now, he could feel her hot breaths wandering on his neck. It was a strange yet pleasant feeling, one he had never felt before. I know you still like Sakura. She murmured, and just like that everything went downhill. No, he immediately rejected her stupid claim. Not anymore. What? Ino implored, her owlish blue eyes blinking at him in surprise. I said I don't like Sakura Haruno anymore. Sakura Haruno. It was the first time she had heard Naruto use Sakura's full name, otherwise, he would either call her Sakura or Sakura-chan. Naruto, she has already apologized to us. What she did after Sasuke's death was stupid, and she had admitted it in front of everyone. You should forgive her just like everyone else did. On the outside it might seem like she was trying to sort out the tension between her two friends, but a small part of her heart still wanted him to keep hating that girl. That girl, no matter what she was to her in the past, had been nothing but an annoyance to Ino ever since she had been given the responsibility of Naruto's well-being. From following her to blatantly requesting her, Sakura had done everything she could to patch up the rift she had created between herself and Naruto, and by extension, annoying the ever-living hell out of her. Ino's thoughts turned back to Naruto, and her face morphed into a frown unseen by anyone. She couldn't help but feel saddened and guilty whenever she looked upon the blonde boy. The reason being, her recent dive into his unfortunate past. As they say, curiosity killed the cat, and indeed, what she found truly horrified her to the core. In the last few months that she had spent with him, Ino learned about everything about him and his life. She saw all the abuse he had suffered at the hands of the civilians, all the tampering with his education during the academy, and all the amount of bullshit he went through his entire life. There had been a few moments when she wanted to break down and cry right there, but she didn't for his sake. She wanted to help him, especially after knowing that she was no different than those civilians. Just like those civilians, Ino also played a major part in scarring Naruto's childhood. When they were children, she constantly used to belittle him for trivial mistakes and never left a chance to spread false rumors about him because she wanted to appear cool and fit in the eyes of others. Throughout their whole childhood, she treated him like trash, yet he never complained about it, not even now when he could easily humiliate her if he wanted to. The entire thing made her feel so guilty that she couldn't even talk to him in the first few days of his treatment. She felt as if she wasn't worthy to even stand in his presence and that he would hate her. So to avoid the humiliation, she kept her distance from him and desperately tried to talk as little as she could. However, as time went on, she couldn't bear seeing Naruto so lifeless and so downtrodden. It made her heart feel like it was being squeezed to the point of exploding. She knew she had to do something fast to lighten up his mood. So with a huge effort, she tentatively started a conversation with him. The immense relief she felt when he didn't ignore her almost made her bawl her eyes out. Her lips twitched upwards into a small smile as she recalled how he had slowly started regaining his usual demeanor under her care. She witnessed him slowly regain the spark he was once known for, and it made her feel so much happy for him. Ino knew that what she had done in the past could never be erased, but the least she could do for him was mend his present and give him a nice future. When she saw him smile for the first time after so many days, she had made up her mind right there. She would stick with him until the very end, no matter what happens. Ino. She was brought out of her thoughts by Naruto's voice. Ha! Surprised, she stumbled back on her feet and began to fall down. However, before she could reach the ground, she felt a strong pair of arms wrap around her waist. I'm sorry, I just got lost. She could have completed her explanation, but midway through her words, her eyes accidentally got a glimpse of the position in which they were in. One hand around her waist while the other one resting on her hips, such was the indecent position Ino found Naruto and herself in. His hot breaths that were tickling her neck were not helping her case either. Naruto, she tried to enlighten him about their embarrassing situation, but the oblivious boy only raised his eyebrows in return. She paused, her eyes roaming here and there to find something that could save her from further shame, but unfortunately, all they saw were countless people smiling at them. The smiles they all had on their faces were not simple smiles either, they had this strange impression of teasing in them. Naruto, she whispered, this time a little louder. We have to meet Tsunade in her office. Her breaths returned to their normal pace when the boy finally let go of her waist and hips. Oh, you are right. She didn't know how and when, but soon, she found herself being dragged into Hokage's office by the unfazed boy. Naruto. Let's go. The smile he had on his face was enough to calm her down. Okay. Hokage office. Ah. For the 1000th time that day, Tsunade moaned as if she was hit by a hefty shot of the most potent aphrodisiac present in the world. Her whole body was aching, pleasure being the reason for it. Raising her free hand, she gently placed it above her huge mammaries, pinching them spontaneously as surges of pain arrived and left. They were sensitive, even more than they used to be when she was going through puberty. Why did this happen to me? A soft whimper escaped her rosy lips when the blouse above her began to expand because of the soaring nipples beneath them. No, not the nipples. Her wails were left unheard as the waves of pleasure kept swashing with each other within her nether regions. Her nipples, which were nearly noticeable underneath her clothes, began to twitch with every single contact they made with the blouse. Damn it! These hormones. Thick smooth thighs hugged each other when a massive spasm of pleasure erupted within her body. Oh, God, it was huge, yet nothing compared to what she had been enduring ever since the war got over. That war was the reason why she was suffering so much. No, not the war. Her breaths were heavier than ever now. That sly brat is the one who should be blamed for everything. Her dazed eyes drifted towards a particular picture that was hanging marvelously on the right wall of her office. Minato, your stupid son is a very. She closed her mouth to stifle a moan when another wave of heinous pleasure warmed up her body. From head to toe, she was sweating, moaning uncontrollably as these dire waves kept pushing her to a veil of indecency. Naruto, she moaned again as she uttered the name of the devil who had shoved her body into this hell. Her nipples twitched again, and so did her moist lower lips. Uzumaki Naruto. Her indecent shout would have been heard throughout the village had she not placed silencing seals around her office. Those seals were amazing. If not for them, then her inappropriate acts would have been exposed by now. Honey brown eyes widened to unimaginable levels when a familiar voice entered her ears. Oh no, she thought. Ba-chan. An array of hot breaths escaped her succulent lips as she slowly turned her eyes towards the direction of the sound. Naruto. Ino. She murmured, her hands still massaging the insatiable mounds of flesh that were twitching madly beneath her loose blouse. What are you doing here? Rationality finally graced her mind when she saw the stupefied look on their faces. Quote. Naruto said nothing as his mind went numb due to the scene that was unfolding in front of him. His face looked as if life had been ed out of him by the Shinigami itself, and his eyes were vacant, twitching slightly only to get a better look at the huge spheres of flesh resting on Tsunade's chest. They were amazing, even more than he had anticipated they would be when he first saw them. Their shape, their size, and the way they were struggling to get out of her clothes were absolutely mind-numbing. Bah! The lump in his throat expanded as his eyes accidentally caught a glimpse of her left nipple. It was small, a gorgeous patch of pink color barely noticeable behind the confinement of her clothes, yet his eyes noticed and refused to leave the sight of it. Ino, who was standing beside him, frowned when she noticed the course of his stare. Naruto, she nudged him on the arm but got no reaction from him. Naruto, this time she nudged him on the ribs but again, got no reaction whatsoever. Naruto, with a thunderous roar, she grabbed his ears and pinched them as hard as she could. Ah, the pain in his voice might have affected her on any other day, but this time she plainly ignored it. It was insignificant. Don't stare at her like that, she shouted, pointing blatantly at the embarrassed leader who was hemming her clothes back to their original state. Naruto winced when Ino increased the force behind her pinches. Okay, I will not look at her, he yelled, all while looking at an embarrassed Tsunade. Your nipple is more visible now, Ba-chan. He notified the poor lady, thinking that he should at least help her in return for putting on such an incredible exhibition earlier. Ino's eyes twitched, fury and jealousy running wild within them. You pervert, what did I say? Don't look at her, she yelled and immediately turned towards the core of his attention, Tsunade Senju, who surprisingly was still trying to tuck her clothes back. And why are you showing him your S? Her question finally prompted Tsunade to stop her actions. You ask why. First cover up your left, Ino whispered, her hand swiftly placed in front of Naruto's eyes, blocking everything that the boy was dying to see again. Tsunade nodded, before turning back to the fuming Ino. So as I was saying, you ask me why am I doing this, right? Ask your boyfriend. She yelled and angrily stood up from her prominent seat, only to collapse again when the clothes accidentally brushed off against her sensitive lips, getting stained by the drops of striking liquid in the process. Naruto stepped back in shock when Ino stared at him with what he calls the meanest look in the universe. It was frightening, enough to drain out every ounce of arousal from his body. I don't know what she is talking about. I swear Ino, he answered, mustering his best innocent face in order to increase the chances of his survival. No, Tsunade was not going to let him leave unharmed this time. He is lying. Her words were barely audible, but somehow both of her guests were able to understand them. After the war, he was the one who healed me with the powers given to him by Rakudo Sennin, and ever since then, I'm suffering from these horrible releases of hormones. The redness of Tsunade's face and the continuous shivering of her body was enough evidence for the two teens. It was true that Naruto had healed Tsunade after the war, but he was totally unaware of the unintended side effects that came with the said power. The fact that his mental state wasn't the best didn't help much either. In fact, it was a miracle that he even managed to pull it off and saved her. One side effect of the healing was the massive influx of hormones due to the resetting of Tsunade's body. What Naruto did wasn't mere healing, he literally revitalized Tsunade's whole body to its teen self by destroying her original one. With the help of her chakra and cells from her old body, he created a new body for her. What resulted was a much younger Tsunade and a body not tainted with alcohol abuse. However, due to the complex nature of what Naruto did, Tsunade's new body was quite literally catching up with the experiences of the old body. Basically, her body was being forced to experience decades worth of hormones in a few weeks, the consequences of which were being shown right now in front of their eyes. At first they were barely noticeable, but from the past few days, they are absolutely killing me, urging me to find someone with whom I can have Tsunade blinked when Ino positioned herself in front of Naruto. Oh no no no. Don't worry Ino, I will never even think of having. Her words came to an abrupt stop when her eyes landed on the bulge that was jostling beneath the trouser of Naruto. It was huge and delicious. Her body began to ache again, but this time it was under her control. Naruto, she whimpered, her sultry words followed by a gentle tug on her blouse to free the center of his attraction again. Ino already knew what was going to happen, and so in order to prevent it, she grasped her friend's hand and began to drag him with her. Ino. No. Naruto, come here. Take responsibility for what you have done to me. Naruto groaned and clutched his abdomen when it let out a loud growl, begging for some delicious food to be filled inside it. Ino. His eyes turned over to the corner of his house where a small kitchen was located. The clean and elegant area was currently occupied by none other than his beautiful friend, Ino Yamanaka. Hurry up, I'm starving. He grumbled, displeasure and hunger palpable on his face. In response to his protests, Ino flung a wooden spoon towards him, missing his whiskered face by a mere fraction of an inch. Starving. Her blue eyes lit with fury. Are you starving for the milk of that cow, Naruto? Anger. Unimaginable anger was seeping out of her voice, and Naruto wasn't that dense to not notice that. Oh come on, Ino. I swear I wasn't looking at her in a bad way. It's just that I phased out when she unexpectedly opened her blouse, and his tale of untruths couldn't continue for too long because, at the direst moment, his mind betrayed him out of nowhere. Face became red and his eyes dilated with a different type of hunger when an image, a rather lewd image to be precise, began to form in front of them. Pink. It was everywhere, staining everything with its warm shade, especially the soft and exotic honey skin of one Tsunade Senju. Naruto could remember that unfortunate incident clearly, the sight of her nipple still etched on the hidden layers of his mind. It was amazing, no matter how he thought about it. Thwack. Ah! A shrill cry left his mouth when another wooden spoon was flung towards him, not missing its target this time. It wasn't a harsh contact, but still powerful enough to sting for a while. Finished dreaming about her s. Naruto froze and his head refused to turn around because of the sheer volume of anger he noted in her voice. Saying she was angry would have been the understatement of the century. She was mad, absolutely livid, so much that he could easily feel her chakra spike spontaneously. Ino, mustering some much-needed courage, he slowly turned around, only to gasp when he saw something he had thought he would never see on Ino's beautiful face. Tears. The infamous glossy liquid was running down her cheeks, staining her beautiful face with countless tear marks. The sight was heartbreaking, even more so when he realized he was the reason why this was happening in the first place. Ino, he whispered and slowly began to walk towards her. Why are you crying? His frown deepened when he was finally able to see her moist face clearly. At that particular moment, Naruto comprehended something very important. Tears don't look nice on your face, Ino. He murmured, eyes curving upward when they saw her lips twitch slightly. It was quick but unhurried enough for him to notice and understand that he was making progress. Look at me. He gently cupped her cheeks within his hands and waited for her to turn her eyes towards him. Unfortunately for him, Ino didn't heed any of his pleas. No matter how good he was acting at that moment, he had truly hurt her feelings with his actions today. Ino could still remember how openly he was leering at the s of their leader, going as far as ignoring her presence while doing so. He was so lost in Tsunade's s that he totally forgot she was standing there with him, and that stung her the most. Don't disturb me Uzumaki and let me prepare our lunch. Her face shrank at the loss of heat when Naruto withdrew his hands, but she composed herself quickly and started to work on the lunch again. What are you preparing? Ramen. Really? Yes. Ino froze when her friend abruptly engulfed her in a warm hug. It was so sudden that if she wasn't aware enough, she would have almost dropped the pot in which the noodles were boiling. Ah, you are so kind, Ino. Her body began to squirm within his hold. Naruto, leave me, she yelled at him. Huh. In response, Ino grabbed his arms and pushed them away from her waist, all while murmuring curses so terrible that they would have made Kushina look like an amateur for a second. Didn't you hear me before? Leave me alone, Naruto. She finally glanced at him and was pleased when the boy immediately stepped away from her. I don't want to talk to you right now. Another thunderous shout escaped from her rosy lips as she threw the wooden spoon at him. Now you can prepare the food on your own, idiot. Bye. With that said, she vanished into the thin air, leaving behind a stupefied Naruto who was still struggling to realize what had just happened. Why is she so angry about that small mistake? Thousands of questions were barraging his mind, yet he had answers to none of them. I wasn't staring at her s. Please forgive me, Ino. I swear, I swear, I swear, I swear my foot. The customers, who were quietly enjoying their drinks at the famous bar of Konoha, immediately stepped away from the angry Yamanaka. The tales of her anger were widely famous throughout the continent and they didn't want to be a part of that tale. Unfortunately for them, Ino noticed their fear-filled gazes that were focused on her. What happened? Why are you all looking at me like this? The anger inside her only intensified when the people started to saunter away further. Bastards. Either drink quietly or leave the place. Also, if any one of you dares to disturb me again, I'll erase that person's memories and replace them with visuals of him getting pegged by himself. The threat was rather ordinary. There were no ill intentions behind it, but the civilian population of the village still chose to leave the bar. Excuse me, lady. A beautiful scowl materialized on Ino's lips as she heard someone's voice from her side. What? Her dazed eyes moved to her left and narrowed down a little when they saw a gorgeous man sitting there with a smile on his face. From the looks of it, the man was either trying to make a move on her or was, in general, admiring her beauty. Either way, she was not interested. If you don't mind, may I ask the name of that idiot who made a lovely lady like you so angry? I swear I will teach that bastard a lesson. The man, completely oblivious to Ino's inner turmoil, whispered slyly as he took small sips of an expensive drink. Slap. It was thunderous, no, it was godly, and if the reactions of people around them were anything to go by, then it was something that would have made even Madara piss his pants. The power behind the slap was astonishing, enough to send the man flying through multiple doors before finally falling down unconscious to the harsh ground. Do you wanna know the name of that idiot? Ino growled, blue eyes relishing the red on the man's face. It was a warning according to her, or a memorial that would remain on his face for a while, always reminding him never to make fun of Naruto. How dare you call him an idiot? Do you even know how important he is to me? She stood up from her seat, prompting others to leave the man alone, and needless to say, no one dared to defy her threat. Slap. This one was even more powerful than the last. Everyone who was still dwelling in the building cringed at the sickening sound that followed the slap. It was horrible, even more than the blood that began to seep out of the man's mouth. Do you still want to teach that bastard a lesson? Another brutal strike followed her words, but this time the target wasn't his face. Instead, her hand smashed into the man's abdomen and ate the living daylight out of every organ that was sheltered inside there. Away from those two, the owner of the establishment, who was watching everything from the sidelines, finally decided to muster up some courage and intervene before his bar was annihilated into nothing but mere debris. It was suicidal, he knew, but what other choice did he have? Lady Ino, he shouted loudly, hoping that she would remember him from the countless conversations they had shared in the past. Hearing the shout, Ino immediately stopped, her fist an inch away from the skin of her target. The presence of alcohol was distinct in her smell and made the owner wrinkle his nose in repulsion. Please let him go. Whatever he said, his brown eyes widened in shock when they saw her flung her right arm towards him. It was unexpected and so the contact was inevitable. With eyes closed, he began to wait for the pain. Ino. The owner immediately opened his eyes and began to cry tears of joy when he saw a familiar man standing right in front of him, his hand holding the wrist of the angry female. Naruto-sama. The exhilaration in the owner's voice was palpable, and so was the smile resting on his lips. It was an indication that he no longer had to fear the Yamanaka because their hero was finally here. Ino, on the other hand, was having no such thoughts. Instead, she was getting angrier with each passing second. His very face was making her angry. Naruto, why are you? Before she could finish her sentence, an overwhelming tug on her arm stopped her. Wah! Everything became blurry for a few seconds and soon, she found herself resting in Naruto's arms. Let me go, she slurred out drunkenly, thumping his chest in protest. Ino, his cold voice froze her whole body. Stop it. And just like that, she went completely silent. After all, she knew the boundaries of his anger better than anyone else and didn't want to push him further than that. Noticing that she won't annoy him anymore, Naruto looked around himself and couldn't help but feel sorry as he observed the damage his friend had caused to the establishment and the poor man who was still lying motionless on the floor. I'm sorry, he whispered to the owner and tried to bow down in respect, but with her in his arms it was very difficult. So he forced her to do the same by nudging her head with his palm. I will pay for the damages, don't worry about it. He added. Don't pay for anything, dumbass. It was his mistake. He say the one who called you an idiot. He also called you a bastard. I will kill him. Oi, calm down, Ino. I'm sure he didn't mean what he said. He is clearly drunk. Everyone around them gasped when their hero, the one who they adored to no end, was silenced completely by the Yamanaka. Through what? On the lip. But it wasn't a causal either. It was hot, passionate, and full of emotions. The intensity of the was such that it made Naruto's legs feel like jelly. In the end, he ended up looking more dazed than the intoxicated girl. But instead of alcohol, his eyes were dazed with pleasure, hunger, and love. Naruto tried to say something but was rendered silent as Ino kept tilting his lips, her tongue begging for the entrance to his mouth. Her delightful alts carried on like that for a few more seconds before Naruto finally opened his lips. Ino. His heartbeat ceased when her tongue infiltrated his mouth, bringing a myriad of flavors with itself. Slowly, his hands began to slither around her waist as she increased the ferocity of the forays. She wasn't holding back, he could tell that. The anger, the craving, and the love, Naruto could feel all of them in the. It was as if Ino was trying to force all her suppressed emotions down his throat. Ino groaned at the lack of warmth when his lips left her unsatisfied amidst the wicked conflict. Her mouth felt empty and wanted nothing more than his tongue inside it again. Ino. She heard him call her again but didn't answer as there was nothing she could think of at that moment because her mind was still spinning because of the earlier drinks. Naruto-sama, she is drunk. A small smile appeared on her lips when she saw him blinking owlishly at everyone present around them. Wait, you mean she only ed me because she's drunk? The owner, who was standing a few meters away from them, couldn't help but feel sorry for him. Why yes, Naruto-sama. Ino's silly smile widened when Naruto slumped to the ground in defeat. A small part of her wanted to intervene but her intoxicated mind refused to do anything. It was still lost in the they just shared and was doing its best to make sure she remembers it after the effects of alcohol wear down. Well, let's go, Ino. Ooh, go, Naruto. You can do it, my darling. An utterly happy and drunk Ino shouted as she patted Naruto's shoulders, the same Naruto who was now carrying her on his back, crying fake tears. Can you please stop calling me that? Naruto wailed, ignoring the snickers of the bystanders. A small pout emerged on her lips. Why? Lowering her face a bit, she gently pecked him on his cheek. Naruto hesitated for a while but soon resumed his walk to his house. Like these had become normal for him a while ago. Ever since they had left that building, Ino had been very persistent in raining these little intimate greetings upon him. By now, he was sure half of his face was covered with the color of her lipstick. Finally, He smiled when he saw the entrance of his apartment. Now he could liberate himself from his horny drunk friend. Naruto. He paused and gulped, already noticing that something weird was about to come out of her mouth. Yes. Can I need to sleep at your house today? My mother will murder me if she. Ino trailed off as her tongue fumbled due to the intoxication. Found out I was drinking alcohol. He could already sense the danger from far. It was running in an open field, shouting that she would try to rape him in the night, but even then, he chose to help her. Sure. He smiled at her and began to unlock the door. Whew! Ino screamed as they entered the house, her face drowned in nothing but pure happiness at the sight of the familiar room. Naruto sighed at the typical behavior of his friend. He didn't know why, but Ino had always preferred his house over her own, going as far as to sleep here numerous times without even asking for permission from her mother. Okay, now rest on the couch while I prepare dinner for us. He whispered and was ready to drop her on the couch, but just as he was about to do that, the girl immediately clung to his arm, wailing like a child at the mere sight of the sofa. No, I don't want to eat anything. I need to sleep, she whined, eyeing the couch as if it was the most horrible thing in the whole world. Sleep. Your room. Her words chilled his spine for a second. My room. Warning bells began to ring inside his head, prompting him to decline her request. He looked at her and gulped. She was beaming like a devil, and the smile she had on her face told him everything. Sure, in the end, he couldn't deny her request and accepted everything that was waiting for him behind the door of his room. Good, she whispered, brushing his ears with her lips. Unintentional or not, Naruto was practically sweating now. Every step he took felt like someone was pushing him into a ravine of suffering and desires. The lady who was resting on his back was not helping him in any way either. Instead, she was massaging his back and setting up his clothes as if she was preparing him for something very important. Ah, his feet quivered when she moaned in his ears. There it is, my lovely bed. The power returned to his feet. Now drop me down, darling. Her shaky tone made him realize that the effects of alcohol were still there. Okay, he whispered and gently lowered her on the soft mattresses of his bed. As Naruto prepared to leave the room, he felt a hand grasp his wrist tightly, almost to the point of making him wince. Turning around, he saw Ino looking at him with an expression that he was certain spelled doom for him. Oh Naruto, the blonde on the bed slurred seductively, her eyes unusually focused for someone inebriated. Where do you think you're going? Naruto froze in fear. Never before had he faced a threat as big as this. Even fighting that gorgeous anomaly Kagaya never inspired such feelings within him. He tried pulling his wrist away, but only felt the hand grip his wrist tighter. Naruto was sweating profusely, completely uncertain of how to respond. As the staring got worse, he just blurted out the first thing that came to his mind. I'm getting changed to get in bed with you. Naruto swore very loudly within his mind as soon as he realized what he said. Why, of all the things he could have said, why did he say that? He didn't even have his nightclothes anywhere on him, and he said he was getting changed. What had he got himself into? He didn't have time to dwell upon what he said though, because Ino let out a very shrill squeal of joy that almost made his ears bleed and heart freeze. Yay, ma darling going to bees with me. She sang happily. Why don't you do it here, Rig, right now? Naruto was almost going out of his mind. He truly didn't know what to do. He could just teleport away, but he didn't want to hurt her feelings any more than he had already done in the morning. She had always been there for him in his toughest time, so hurting her intentionally was something he could never even think of. But I have to get out of this situation, he thought as his mind began to think of ways he could escape the situation without hurting her feelings. As he brooded, he didn't realize that he was standing there with a frown on his face, doing nothing. However, Ino noticed and clapped her hands, bringing Naruto out of his trance. Of course, your Sushizo get changed in front of me. Ah, that's so adorable, My love Lily darling. She chirped happily as she pointed to the room opposite of the bed. The bad bathroom is Riz over there, feel free to get changed in there. Just like that, Naruto's feeling of complete and utter doom came crashing back down onto him with a force that made Madara's Tengai Shinsei feel like a gentle breeze. He wondered why Ino was telling him where to go in his own house, but put it down as her being drunk. Seeing no other choice, he marched robotically towards the bathroom in a way that resembled a prisoner walking to their execution. As he finished changing, he stood there staring at the door for what felt like years. He really didn't know why he was so reticent in the first place. Here he was, with a girl that was arguably one of the hottest in the entire village. One who willingly came to his house, laid in his bed with no protest, and also ed him numerous times in a single day. She was practically throwing herself at him, yet he still felt so reluctant for some reason. However, he knew that he had no choice. There was no escape, except for if he chose to abandon her, which is something that he would never do, even if threatened with death. Taking a deep breath and smoothing out any wrinkles in his clothes, he slowly walked through the door. What he saw stole his breath away. There stood Ino, lying carelessly on his bed with her blonde hair splayed all over the white sheets. Her eyes were closed, probably due to the drowsiness, while her body was gleaming in the beautiful rays of the moon. Everything about her was spectacular, and after so many years, a strange emotion churned within his heart, making it all giddy and uncertain. Naruto, what's happened? Are you not going to join me here? He blinked when the melodious voice of his friend entered his ears. Hesitated at first, he eventually swallowed the lump in his throat and began to walk towards the bed. Just have to stay there until she sleeps. He kept repeating that in his mind. After all, it was the only thing keeping him intact at the moment. Ino frowned as she saw him getting closer. Even in this half-sleep state, she could easily notice the anxiety on his face. Why it hurts me to see you being so cow-causies around me. I won't hurt you. Her words were effective as the boy immediately stopped shivering and glanced at her. I am your friend. Nah, she blushed when an unexpected hiccup interrupted her lecture. Damn it. I feel like. Words perished in her mouth and her head fell on the mattress as the sleep finally took over her. Quote. A giggle left Naruto's lips. Stupid Ino. He shook his head as he gently held her head and positioned her properly on the bed. Good night, he whispered, his lips automatically reaching down to her forehead. Sweet dreams, Ino, and with that, he finally placed a soft on her skin. It was quick but important enough to make him feel nice on the inside. Now I can finally eat dinner, he chirped, almost ready to run towards the kitchen. Miso. His mumbling stopped when he felt someone's hand on his wrist. Looking down, he gulped when he saw a completely conscious Ino. Oh, God, he froze yet again. Sleep with me, Uzumaki. I cannot sleep alone. She sounded as if she never got drunk to begin with. Her words were not even sounding as requests now. They were orders, decrees, telling him to obey them or survive the outcomes. Oh hee, you are still awake, he giggled, and for once ever since she had bought them for him, his toad-imprinted pajamas were coming across as interesting. Look at me, and so he did. Come here. She pointed to the unoccupied space beside her. Okay. Swallowing all the uncertainty, Naruto finally laid down beside her and instantly sighed when she enveloped him in a tight bear hug. Ino's muffled laughs reverberated throughout the silent room. Oh, my Naruto, she smiled as her dazzling eyes relished in the beautiful creation that was her friend. Naruto saw the look in her eyes. It was the same as the one she had in that bar, full of love and compassion. It did confuse him greatly. Why only him? There were thousands of men in Konoha who would die to get a small smile from her, yet here she was, smiling warmly at one of the biggest failures in the world. Ino. He adjusted himself on the soft mattress. Can I ask you something? Today was the day he was going to get some answers, and the fact she was drunk meant she would not lie to him about anything. It was his golden chance. When Ino answered in the affirmative, Naruto asked a question that had been plaguing his mind ever since he noticed her affections a few weeks ago. Why? He didn't need to elaborate further. Ino knew full well what he meant. He wanted to know what made him so attractive in her eyes. In response, she sat up and slowly pulled his head into her lap. As she stroked his hair, his eyes drifted closed and she started speaking softly, but clearly. Before I answer that, Naruto, I have to tell you something. It all began back in the academy, when we were kids. She then started recounting the days when they were children, something Naruto didn't have the fondest memories of. But he knew that Ino would never hurt him, and he could tell that this was something that she needed to do. She needed to get this off her chest, as he could tell from their interactions, that something was bothering her deeply. His eyes shot open as he felt drops of warm liquid falling onto his face. Looking up at Ino, he saw the beautiful blonde's eyes squeezed shut with tears falling from her eyes. I regret it, you know. Everything I did, everything I said. I bullied you so hard in your youth and yet you don't resent me in the slightest for it. How can you forgive me? What sort of a person am I? At this point, her tears were flowing freely and her voice was starting to turn hysterical. Naruto knew he had to act in order to prevent Ino from sinking too deeply into her story. As such, he quickly got up from her lap, wrapped Ino within his arms, and began to pat her back. That seemed to work as Ino's sobs lessened and she stopped shivering as much. They stayed like that for a while, before Ino restarted her story with a steadier voice. When Sasuke left, what was left of my stupid crush died at last. I took a serious look at myself, and reconsidered a lot of things. Although I didn't know it back then, I sure as hell know it now. Her voice drifted off to a whisper as she slowly lifted her head and met the other blonde's eyes. Hazy blue met vivid blue, the Rinnegan in his left eye oddly suited him, she ideally noticed as they stared at each other for what seemed like an eternity. Naruto could see the nervousness and devotion within Ino's eyes and likewise, Ino could see the concern and strength in his. Taking a deep breath, what she said next made Naruto freeze up. Uzumaki Naruto, I love you. 3 words. 3 succinct words were enough to shatter his mind into pieces. Said in the softest tone, those words were everything he had been craving to hear for the longest time. They were something he had thought he would never hear in his entire lifetime. When, he murmured, his mind still trying to process everything that had transpired in the span of the last few minutes. The moment when we first talked after the war. I fell for you, Naruto. I fell for you hard. In this world, if there's someone whom I love with all my heart, then it's you, Uzumaki Naruto. You're my everything and I have sworn to love you till the end of my life, whether you like it or not. Ino confessed in a quiet tone, her teary eyes glowing under the moonlight as she struggled to maintain an even face in front of him. During the whole proposal, Ino had prepared herself for every conceivable outcome, but somehow the sheer wide-eyed paralysis had failed to enter her imagination, and she had a very good imagination. For a boy whose whole personality was built around shouting, seeing Naruto so silent frightened her. He seemed neither upset nor shocked at the confession. If you don't feel, it all happened in a blur that her wet eyes failed to notice, and soon, Ino found herself sprawling helplessly on the mattress while the boy she had just admitted her love to raided her lips with an incredible desire in his eyes. A delightful moan escaped from her plump rosy lips when Naruto grabbed her head from behind and brought it closer to his face, something that helped him increase the power behind the Ino. He finally let her go, but one could still see the unquenchable hunger dancing within his eyes. His lips fumbled, and his tongue wandered along the edges of his mouth to taste her again. She was delicious, even more than ramen, he concluded. Her lips were like honey, warm and sweet. He paused again to get a nice view of her face. I want to confess too, he groaned within while the thought of doing something stupid haunting his mind every second. He didn't want to ruin it as it was the most precious moment of his life. I love you too, Ino. It felt like an enormous pressure was lifted off his shoulders when he somehow managed to utter those words without ruining anything. And when he did, for the first time in his life, Naruto felt complete. He felt like he had finally found the missing part of his heart. This time it was Ino who initiated and she immediately let him know the difference between their expertise. Naruto didn't stand a chance against her and couldn't help but feel inferior to the barbarity with which she was ravaging his mouth. She was leagues above him and he felt no shame in accepting that fact. It was his first time and everyone else at their first time, but that didn't stop him from trying. Closing his eyes, he pushed her back onto the mattress and started to nibble her lower lip, biting it gently whenever she tried to overwhelm him. Their game of cat and mouse continued for a while before he finally got a hold of the situation. You look beautiful, Ino. He whispered, pausing a little to get his breath under control. Of course, even in her bewildered and drunken state, Ino didn't leave the chance to laud herself, although her cheeks darkened a little at his sudden confession. By the way, her query was cut short when he leaned again, pressing his lips against hers in a rough. The result was instantaneous. Ino's whole body froze, and her mind went blank as Naruto kept tilting her lips. After a few seconds of play, she noticed he was going to pull back and snapped out of her daze, quickly bringing him closer and sealing their lips once again. Noticing that she was all into it and there was no going back, Naruto's hands moved as well and began to slither around Ino's curvaceous form. After staying there for a while, he daringly went up, slipping right under the dark violet blouse, and entered the valley hidden beneath it. There he found something amusing. You don't wear any bra? He asked her, briefly pulling back from the. No. Her smile was something one could die for and he was no exception. But how does that make any difference? You're only interested in Ing, right, Naruto? It wasn't a question. It was more of a suggestion. Naruto didn't need to be told twice. Hungry as he had never been, he crawled on top of her and lowered his head a little, his lips an inch away from hers. I'm interested in everything that involves you, Ino. At first, Ino didn't understand what he meant by that, but when he began to her with small s, she came to realize what he was doing. From her fleshy lips to the spotless soft skin of her neck, he began to caress her everywhere while she just continued to savor the pleasure. Ah! Her body shivered with pleasure when his hands began to hike towards her front, looking for the secret treasures that were her huge S. It wasn't long before he finally found what he was looking for, and in a motion she had no hope of following, he undid the buttons of her favorite purple blouse and cupped her right in his palm before it could even come in contact with the air. Her lips parted a little to moan loudly when her prodding nipple managed to find some space between his fingers and made contact with the cold air. As soon as it did, it immediately stiffened, begging for someone to warm it with their hot saliva. Fortunately, it didn't have to wait for too long because Naruto's eager lips enveloped it in their warmth while his right hand began to knead the other one. Feeling too overwhelmed by the pleasure, Ino began to squirm under him. And no, not so hard. It's sensitive. She tried to tell him but Naruto didn't stop. He just continued to ravage her s without any care. Soon, her light squirming advanced into a deeper moan when he abruptly pinched her nipple and squeezed it affectionately between his teeth, something that surprisingly felt good. The thought that she had just confessed to him only turned her on even more. Ah! Squeeze them harder. Her back arched in a beautiful angel when his hands grew more feverish in their groping, much to her delight. Ino, Naruto moaned between his ing and blushed lightly when she only moaned in return. I have always wanted to do this to you, especially when I first saw you after that trip with Ero Sennin. You can't imagine how much I wanted to you at that moment. His words only made her hornier as she began to take deep breaths. Ino gasped in surprise and leaned back so she could meet his gaze, lust and love dancing wildly within her eyes. Real? She asked him, and when he nodded his head, the lust inside her doubled. Then go on. Do whatever you want to do with my body, Naruto. Ravage it. Eat it. I don't care. I'm all yours. The joy in her voice knew no bounds as she stared at the boy with whom she was in love. The fact that he had always desired her only increased the joy further. Naruto's blush darkened several shades, matching the color of her nipples now. Slowly he gave her another grope, relishing in the cute outcry her mouth released as his fingers toyed with her tits, digging deep into her soft skin. Finally, after a few more minutes of intense squeezing, he released her and let his hands drift down her toned abdomen before reaching her skirt. I will not be backing up now, he warned her, his hand grasping the button of her clothing and letting the beautiful skirt fall slowly to the ground with a quiet sound. Ino smiled coyly as her lower half was exposed to her lover, but made no move to cover anything. I don't want you to stop. Instead, I want you to me like it's the last, she squealed, her body shaking violently when he slowly brushed a finger along her. Naruto felt her shiver in his hold for a moment, smiling when she refused to object in any way. That I will, Ino. He whispered, finishing his sentence by giving her left a hard squeeze. Ah! Ino screamed and started to breathe heavily as her lover increased the speed of his ministrations, his finger now an inch deep within her lower folds. Don't stop. It was euphoric, way better than what she had read in those stupid magazines. It even exceeded everything she had heard from Anko. Yes, her, a lady wombs that is more crucial than breathing itself. Hee. Sure, she heard him whisper, his voice filled with fun and lust. Ah! Another scream echoed in the room when he gently squeezed her, sending her over the edge as a massive wave of orgasm departed her lower lips and coated his fingers in her release. Naru, she wasn't even allowed to rest. Her body, which was trembling due to the delightful orgasm she just had, tensed when the boy began to violate her lips again while lying perfectly on top of her. Shish. Ha. 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 She could only moan as beads of sweat began rolling down her beautiful red face. Dumbass, don't tease me more. Finish it already. Finally, she managed to form a few words and screamed at him angrily, but that anger didn't last long when Naruto threw his shirt in the dark corner of the room and began to unhook her favorite toad pajamas. Blushing fiercely, Ino started to ogle his bare chest. Her eyes lit up with lust at the notable pieces of abdominal muscle he'd unveiled, built as lean and attractive as she'd expect from a well-trained shinobi. Shamelessly, her hungry eyes then reached for his well-toned abdomen even before he'd completely discarded the shirt. It was incredible, amazing enough to be whistle-worthy. My, she whispered, smiling proudly at the boy who simply looked away from her because of the embarrassment. Her breaths were calming down now, still far from normal but enough to speak without wavering or stuttering. You proved me wrong, Naruto. I thought you were someone who only liked Ing, but damn how wrong I was. I mean, look at them, she pointed at her swollen tits. You ed them dry. Although, I don't have any problem with it, next time if you want to. Her long speech came to an abrupt end when Naruto lowered himself on her and smooched her lips again, this time a little lightly. Get ready. She immediately froze at those words. Wait. She didn't even have the time to get ready as Naruto dropped his pajamas and boxers in one fell swoop. The sight of his fully erect manhood stunned her silent. His manhood looked furious and eager to go, a vein bulging along its considerable length. The mushroom-shaped tip stared at her, dead in the eye, looking as if it was challenging her to do something. You speak a lot sometimes, you know. Naruto, she could have argued back by calling him a hypocrite but chose to remain silent, her eyes still fixed on the monster in front of her. She remained like this for a while, transfixed by the huge pull of meat that was wobbling over her abdomen. Straddling her, he laid his chest on top of hers, flattening her large S as he swooped in for another deep. In between the passionate, Naruto slowly lowered his hand and squeezed her thick thighs, moaning loudly as his palm caressed her soft and plump flesh. HNNN, he let out another moan as he began lining up his in front of her folds. Naruto. Her eyes widened in shock and pain as her body took his with all the warmth it could muster at that moment. Thankfully for her, due to the intense training in the past, she had developed an incredible resistance to pain. So when his length finally tore through her him, she was able to ignore the pain for the first few seconds. The fact that he'd gotten her slopping wet from that ridiculous molesting of her only iced her more in the process. Are you okay? Her heart bloomed with warmth when she heard him whisper that question. It felt nice. Why yeah, she nodded with a small lovely smile on her face. Naruto didn't take long to smile back. I love you. Without any hesitation, he spoke those 3 words as he resumed his thrusting, unhurried, letting her adjust to his size. Ino's gaze slowly lowered to the chasm where the incredible spectacle of their union was occurring. His girth was parting her pink folds down the middle as he moved up and down along her body. She could feel the heat of his overflowing her moist channel with its warmth. She couldn't believe it. She had finally done it. She was having with her Naruto. Ino. Naruto groaned, and the next thing she knew was that she was hunching on his lap with his palms planted on her huge forehead. A moan escaped her mouth when he gave her a tight squeeze, making sure to knead them as hard as he could. As his squeezing increased, her moans became louder, and before she knew it, she went from having gentle with him to bouncing up and down on his shaft at every thrust he made, trying to match his rhythm. The room that was completely silent until a few moments ago got filled with loud and obscene sounds of raucous. A shrill cry left her swollen lips when his powerful thighs smacked the bottom of her, imprinting red on it. Soon, the thrusts became blurs to the eyes as they both got immersed in the most powerful sensation their bodies had ever felt. Ino's began to squelch louder, growing wet from all his aggression and love. Naruto, too, groaned uncontrollably as he encased himself through her tightness. Oh my. Yes. Ah. Naruto. Naruto. She cried out in shameless ecstasy as he crashed into her bare hard. I'm about to come, Naruto. His thrusts made her bounce uncontrollably, prompting her to cup her own unconsciously groping them and heightening her pleasure even more. The sight of her groping and pleasuring herself was incredibly arousing to Naruto. So to elicit more reactions from her, he increased his pace, smiling slightly when her shoulders curled up in pleasure. Just hold on for a while, he whispered, pulling her hair to keep her awake. Naruto. Ino whimpered, shoulders curling in on herself as her pelvis burned and tightened. I can't. Her words withered into a cute groan as a wave of orgasm washed over her voluptuous body. Naruto groaned when he felt her tighten around his thrusts becoming shorter and faster as his end drew closer by the second. Naruto, she cried, gasping and writhing as he continued thrusting. Naruto moaned, hips clamping from the pleasure. Unable to hold back any longer, a burning rush flowed down his before he unloaded ropes of cum into Ino's spasming. The Yamanaka moaned deeply as he came, her mind going blissfully blank from the sensation of him coming inside her. Naruto. Her half-lidded eyes, filled with love, affection, and satisfaction made him feel truly happy. Ino. I love you. The room went silent, nothing but the sound of panting could be heard. Amidst the silence, Naruto was running those words through his head, again and again, trying to store them in his memory forever. No matter how many times he heard those words, they never failed to bring a smile to his face. I love you too, Ino. On getting no reply, he looked down, only to see her softly snoring in his hold, a light chuckle leaving his lips at the scene. Well, Ino, looks like your wish of sleeping with me is going to come true right now. Chuckling slightly at his little joke, he moved her softly to settle her on the mattress and joined her soon. As soon as he laid down, Ino snuggled closer to him, and the sensation he felt was oddly fulfilling. Covering them both with the blanket, he uttered his last words for the night. Good night, Ino. Morning. Slap, slap, slap. Obscene sounds of flesh slapping flesh were reverberating throughout the room, polluting the serene morning with their vulgarity. Naruto, Slow down. Ino screamed for the thousandth time that morning. It was getting out of her hands. She could feel her mind going numb due to the amount of pleasure that was surging through her sweat-covered body, especially her rosy red, which was the current victim of his ferocious pounding. Like a pre-programmed tool, her wide hips were moving up and down on the thick shaft of her lover, covering it with the slippery liquid of craving and lust. Naruto, who was watching each and every movement of her enormous, growled at the sight in front of him. It was beautiful and equally arousing at the same time. No, he responded and abruptly shoved all of his deep into her cavity again, eliciting a loud moan from the girl. Ah! Her screams of pleasure were like music to his ears. He growled once again to complement her whimpers, losing himself even more in the sensations of her tight cunt. Just from seeing the throes of ecstasy that Ino was in, compelled him to give her another hard thrust. I want more. Moan harder, Ino. He whispered and lowered himself a little so that his right hand could reach her ponytail while his left could grab the hanging melons of his lover. In a smooth draw, he pulled the enormous orbs of flesh within his palm and began to knead them harshly. Oh God, he felt like finishing up at that very moment but controlled himself quickly. It was not the time to quit, he still had a lot of things he needed to do with her. So with newfound vigor, he began to squeeze her tits even harder, all while pounding her gigantic and firm with his shaft. Ino was on her all fours now, her body shaking with nothing but pure pleasure. The position she was in made her feel like she was some kind of an animal who was receiving the punishment by her master. A part of her mind was very ashamed of everything she was doing, but that reasonable fraction was effortlessly being overwhelmed by the immoral part of her sanity, which wanted nothing but to devour this pleasure as much as she could. Oyeess, she moaned once again when Naruto squeezed her a lot harder than before. Pulling out from her, he then started pounding her furiously. Seeing that she was enjoying the punishment, Naruto let go of her ponytail for a second before pulling it back once again. You're such a lewd girl, Ino. A few months ago, you didn't even want to talk to me, but now, here you are, whimpering and moaning like a bitch under me. His words were supposed to make her feel like a pathetic whore, but instead, only increased the heat inside her walls. Hee. Try harder, Naruto. Words like these barely affect me. She murmured, her words coming out in fumbles because of the tongue that was hanging out of her mouth, covered with saliva and residue of her lover's sperm. Slap. A very obscene scream left her mouth when Naruto let go of her and abruptly smacked her, coloring the already red orbs of flesh in an even darker shade. Wah! Slap. She was cut short by another hard slap to her. Ah! Her lower lips finally expanded as a medley of his and her love fluids began to seep out of them, covering his shaft with more warmth and lubricant. It wasn't long before he resumed his ramming again. With one quick, powerful thrust, he buried his hardened deep inside of her hungry snatch. Ino, you're so wet. You were really waiting for this, weren't you? He asked. Ino somehow managed to nod slowly and began to slowly move back and forth, impaling herself again and again on her boyfriends. Of course I was. Now shut up and me hard. She shouted, much to the increased pleasure and pride of Naruto. With a nod of his head, Naruto began to pound into her harder, increasing his pace bit by bit until he was pounding into her at a nearly blinding pace. Shit. Not so fast, she croaked, her body shivering with a sudden spasm of pleasure. In answer, Naruto clasped her fat cheeks within his hands and gave them a light squeeze, gleaming madly when he felt the soft flesh try to devour his fingers. Just a little more, he beseeched as he held her by her waist and increased the speed of his thwacking. Soon, all he could see was her plump hips and wet folds which were wrapped tightly around his fleshy rod. Og! Naruto closed his eyes as he shoved all of his length inside her. The end was close, he could feel it and wanted to enjoy it to its fullest. Almost there, Ino. His face was completely drowned in pleasure now, to such an extent that it was barely recognizable. Slap. Naruto felt his cum bubble up in his balls and in a swift motion, his started painting her walls white as he came inside her with a muffled moan. His hips jerked up with every stream of cum his fired. Ah, he moaned as he finally allowed himself to settle on the back of the girl who was still trembling due to the pleasure she had just withstood. Did you cum inside me again? Yes. I see. Then start thinking about some cute names for a child. Huh. Neither of the two lovers noticed a flicker of silver in the corner of the room, nor the slight dampness of the spot that the flicker disappeared from. Ooh. Naruto blushed as he stared at Ino, who was preparing food for him in the kitchen. For some reason, she was looking a lot more beautiful than she usually did. How long are you going to keep blushing like that, Naruto? His cheeks turned scarlet. Aye, he sputtered, mentally cursing himself for behaving like this in front of her. I am. He was cut short when Ino began to giggle softly. Ah, look at you. You're looking so cute right now. She squealed from the kitchen. Completely opposite of what I witnessed in the bedroom. And there it was, the anticipated dig at his bedroom persona. Ino, don't tease me like that. The Yamanaka heiress just chuckled in response. Why shouldn't I? She asked him, her eyes gleaming playfully as she plopped the pan on the heated stove. It makes me feel awkward, you know. He groaned. Another chuckle escaped from her mouth. Awkward. After ravaging me like that in the morning, how can you still feel awkward? Oh, come on, Naruto. Naruto turned his eyes to her, staring at her voluptuous body for a second before turning back to her face. Of course, Ino. What happened in the bedroom was in the heat of the moment. I was thrilled and aroused at that time. Now, I'm back to my senses. He spoke, tapping the wooden table with his nails in order to alleviate his embarrassment. Ino stopped her work. So, that means you regret doing it with me. Her voice was fragile, accompanied by an equally shaky expression on her face. Of course not. I enjoyed every second of it, Ino. Why would you even think I regret it? She shook her head with a small smile on her face, the shaky expression nowhere to be seen now. I don't know, maybe you already have someone else in your life. She mumbled in a carefree manner as her hands began working on the breakfast again. Now it was Naruto's turn to laugh at her suspicion. Out of everything she could have uttered, she decided to speak something as stupid as that. Someone else. Hee. His snickering deluged the room in mischief. You are no better than me, Ino. We are both equally dumb. He grumbled with a lazy shake of his head. If I already had someone else in my life, then I would have never touched you, let alone take advantage of your feelings. You are too nice for me to do that. Putting the veggies aside, Ino flashed a smile at her lover, looking truly happy with what she just heard. Moments like these were the reason why she fell in love with this blonde idiot in the first place. Ah, you are such a gentleman, Naruto, the perfect husband material. She exclaimed, her eyes gleaming with love and admiration. Marry me. Ino. He. Naruto gasped, a heavy whimper leaving his lips as his eyes looked at the familiar memorial in front of him. Located amidst the deep forest that surrounded the Naka shrine, the memorial was a huge slab of stone, dedicated to none other than his best friend, Uchiha Sasuke. A friend who got so lost in the darkness that even he couldn't pull him out from the valley of sadness and evil. Sasuke, Naruto whispered as he relaxed beside the infamous memorial of his friend. It was one of the few places that the people of Konoha loathed to no end, because to them, Uchiha Sasuke was someone who attempted to eradicate the peace in their beloved hero. Uchiha or not, Sasuke was someone who's hated by almost everyone in his village, and that's what hurt Naruto the most. Why did you do what you did? Raising his hand a little, he cleaned the dust from the surface of the monument because the grains of dust looked like the stains that the people of his village have scattered over his friend's reputation. Because he tried to achieve something that was ludicrous and unfit. Every muscle in his body tensed as soon as he heard a familiar voice from his behind. It was her, he was sure of it. Naruto. Her soft voice entered his ears again, making him groan in annoyance and anxiety at the same time. He didn't want to face her, At least not in front of Sasuke's grave. Are you still mad at me? To answer her disheartening query, he could have turned around and looked her in the eyes, but he didn't, and instead went with a negative shake of his head. Then why are you not turning around? His heartbeat fastened as he heard the sound of her footsteps getting closer. Anger and irritation began to bubble inside him at the mere thought of seeing her beautiful face again. Ha! He inhaled loudly when she unexpectedly crouched beside him, trying to take a good look at him. Are you okay? You look a little troubled. His eyes grew wide when she placed a hand on his forehead. Sakura. He finally snapped at her, but his improbable irritation soon got replaced by a look of surprise when his gaze settled on her beautiful face. Huh, was the only thing that came out of his mouth as his mind was too busy appreciating the art that was her face. Maybe it was the reminiscences of his old self, or maybe it was the hormones, but whatever it was, her face came across as more stunning than it had ever been in the past. She had filled out in all the right areas, and it was only during these past few minutes did Naruto truly notice the changes in her. Before, she didn't have any chest, her hair barely reached the nape of her neck, and her wasn't that round. Now, her chest was no longer flat, and instead boasted a pair of respectable D-size S. Her hair was grown out, just touching the lower part of the back, and her was now far more thick and plump. All in all, Naruto would say that this Sakura was far prettier than the one he chased after during his younger years. Despite this, he still couldn't squash down the spark of anger that he felt upon seeing the pink hair of the person he once loved. Sakura, who noticed his eyes on herself, smiled at the boy, waving her other hand at him. Hello, Naruto. Her smile wavered for a second when the boy didn't answer, but she quickly composed herself. How are you? She tried again, but the result was the same. Suffocating silence shrouded the atmosphere as the boy and the girl kept looking at each other, neither daring to break eye contact. Finally, after staring at her for a minute, Naruto broke the silence with his words. I'm fine. What about you, Sakura? He grumbled, his tone of voice exhibiting sheer lack of interest, a thing which didn't go unnoticed by the girl, who immediately looked down in shame. I'm fine too. Just finished learning a few more things from Tsunade, she whispered meekly. Oh, tears welled up in her beautiful eyes when he regarded her with those sharp eyes again, but she managed to stop them before they could fall. She stopped when she noticed him standing up. Well, I need to visit Ba-chan, he murmured and was about to stand up, but a hand on his wrist stopped him from doing so. Why? Sakura's hopeless voice broke something inside him. What? He asked, daring not to look at her beautiful face again, because if he did, he was sure he would end up doing something stupid, something that would get them both in trouble. Why are you behaving like this? Am I not your friend anymore, Naruto? He clenched his jaw in frustration and helplessness. He wanted to leave, but a part of him wasn't conceding with him at that moment. It wanted to stay here, listen to her, and talk rubbish just like the old times. No, you are still one of my best friends, Sakura, he lied. Sakura tightened her hold on his wrist, nudging him a little closer to her. Liar, she whispered as she gently caressed his cheeks, her wet green eyes only intensifying the sadness on her face. I know you hate me, a hollow chuckle echoed throughout the silent clearing as she finally withdrew her hand from his flushed and confused face. Naruto was in a dilemma. He didn't know what was happening because he had never seen Sakura act like that, at least not in front of him. Usually, she would be full of life, but today she looked like a different Sakura. I don't hate you, Sakura. I never did and I never will. You are the one who started all of this by breaking all ties between us. You left me alone when I needed you the most, he snarled, but immediately came to regret his actions when the girl recoiled back in surprise and shock. I know, Naruto. This is all my mistake. I'm the one who ruined everything. Precious pearls of liquid fell from her cheeks, staining the dry and green ground of the forest. But now I want to start over again. I want to become your friend again. Not a best friend, but a good friend, Every word she spoke was uttered with such conviction that for a second they surprised Naruto's Sakura. The wall was breaking, little by little. Sakura shook her head, tears flying here and there as she tried her best to stop that dreaded sob from escaping her lips. Unfortunately, she failed in the end. Don't show me any kind of pity, Naruto. I don't deserve it. I'm a very bad person and all I deserve is pain and suffering. So hurt me as much as you want to, but please don't hate me. I don't want to be ignored by you anymore. If you want to call me names, do it, I won't mind, but please don't look away from me when I am near you. It hurts, Naruto, it hurts. Her voice finally gave up as she began to cry in front of her friend. Saku. Naruto went silent, pain shattering his heart as his eyes stared at the torn face of his friend. He didn't like it. No matter how much he hated her, he still didn't like it. Tears never looked good on her face, never. They weren't meant to be there. The only thing meant to be there was a smile, a dazzling beautiful smile. No. He grimaced when he took notice of her moist green eyes. They were full of tears now, something that was annoying him to no end. Sakura, he whispered, leaning a little closer to her. Don't cry like a baby. Mustering up the courage, he gently brushed her cheeks with the hem of his sleeves. You don't look good with tears on your face. Now that he was closer, he noticed some things he previously missed earlier. There were distinct bags under her eyes with dark shadows that were still visible, despite the thick layer of makeup covering her face. The makeup also didn't completely hide the wrinkles that trailed all over her face, but it did do a rather good job of concealing them to the average passerby. He also noticed that her hair, despite being longer, was no longer as vibrant as it once was. In fact, he could see some dry strands showing and also see that some parts of her hair were frazzled. Feeling rather concerned, despite everything that happened between them, he took out a handkerchief and gently started wiping away the tears on her face, being extra careful to not ruin the makeup. He couldn't stop a smile from forming on her face when the girl blinked at him, her eyes showing signs of hope and happiness all of a sudden. SSHH. Let me clean your face first. If Ino sees us like this, she will start thinking absurd things. He joked in hopes that it would uplift her mood a little, but sadly, it seemed to end up doing the opposite, if Sakura's frown was anything to go by. Indeed, Sakura was not at all happy about what she heard, and her mood withered like a dying flower. Ino. Sakura sulked. How could she forget about her best friend? She is basically living with him in his house. The already awful mood deteriorated even further as she finally realized how important her friend must be to Naruto now. Otherwise, he was not the type of guy who would even think about someone's opinion. Ino. Still, she decided to confirm it herself. Naruto trailed off, breaking eye contact and unwilling to answer. The way Naruto turned his head away from her was enough to fetch the answers, and the blush that followed his turn only cemented her assumptions. So, you two are dating? Her heart stopped for a second when he gently nodded his head, confirming her guiltiest notions. Oh, she whispered, her eyes lowering back to the ground in order to search for something interesting but found nothing. Why am I feeling sad? She asked herself, genuinely curious about this strange behavior. There was no reason for her to be sad about that revelation. Instead, she should be happy for her friend because finally, after so many struggles, he found someone to spend the rest of his life with. Still, I'm sad, and yet here she was, fuming with jealousy and sadness at the mere notion of them being together. Maybe it's because Ino was able to see something I was never able to see in Naruto. A lovely kind boy who just needed love from someone. Sakura. Naruto's warm voice finally snapped her out of her heavily depressing thoughts. Are you alright? You were spacing out there. Hearing the concern in his voice, directed towards her, felt good. It made her feel wanted again by the person who had always looked out for her. The concern in his eyes was genuine, which caused her to lighten up a bit in hopes that they might be able to mend their relationship again. Naruto. Before she could continue, she was interrupted by the sound of someone landing near them. Hokage-sama is requesting your presence, Naruto. Damn it, Kakashi-sensei, why do you always have such bad timing? Her frustration must have shown on her face because Kakashi backed up a bit while looking at her wearily. Ooh, why are you following me? Naruto peeked to his side, a strange emotion lingering on his face as he stared at the girl who has been following him for a while now. I want to meet Tsunade too, Sakura answered with a smile on her face. Naruto's deep blue eyes turned towards her. For what? He leaned a little closer to her, completely missing the blush that bloomed on her face at that moment. To examine her. Recently, she has been suffering from strong hormonal disruptions. Now that made him blush as an indecent image of Tsunade moaning loudly on her chair popped up in his mind, her S surprisingly in the image. Oh, he tangled his legs in order to hide the rising blade of his manhood. The awkwardness between them was already sky high and he didn't want to increase it anymore. Unfortunately for him, Sakura saw the distress as well as the tinge of blush on his face. Are you having a fever, Naruto? She asked, genuine concern apparent in her voice. No. The frown on her face deepened along with the concern that had begun to bubble up inside her heart. Your whole face is red, Naruto, and you are breathing heavily. Both are symptoms of a fever. Her words prompted him to look away from her in embarrassment, something that didn't go unnoticed by her. From the moment she had met him, he had been looking away from her a lot. So much that it was becoming a source of concern for her now, but she chose not to make any comments about it in fear of annoying him further. Let me check, at least as a medic, she urged. Naruto immediately forgot about everything as soon as he heard her words. As a medic, he thought, as a tinge of grief rose within his heart. I'm totally healthy, Sakura. His whisper only worsened her mood and he knew that. Ino is very serious about my health, you know. He added immediately, rubbing his head sheepishly at the thought of his lover. In response to that, Sakura just lowered her hand. I see, she murmured. I'm glad you have Ino. She was cut short by the loud and obnoxious shouts that surrounded them instantly, without any warning. Naruto-kun. Oh my god. He is standing in front of me. The hero of the war. Can I get a, Naruto-san? Me too. Me three. I want a baby. Sakura cringed at the last request, barely restraining her hands from punching the life out of the black-haired girl who dared to demand a baby from her friend. Now, you shouldn't ask for something as ridiculous as that, dear. She whispered and growled lightly when she noticed that her fake smile and madly twitching eye were having no effect on the girl. Stay away from him, you pink-haired bitch. If you want his baby too, then you can have it after I'm done with him. Naruto, who was talking to his other fangirls, choked on his saliva as soon as the girl uttered those absurd words. Quickly, he turned to Sakura in order to restrain her, but was utterly surprised when he saw her standing there silently, a little too silently if you asked him. Sakura, he called her, and his fear turned into a reality when instead of answering him, she just began to laugh at the girl. Fangirls, I pity you all. A sweat drop formed on the back of his head as he listened to her words, full of irony and unawareness. Naruto-kun. Another shrill shout made him turn his head back to his fangirls, and soon, he found himself busy with signing autographs and giving small s. Sakura, who was obviously watching the whole thing, couldn't help but feel very sad as her eyes witnessed the interaction between Naruto and his fangirls. He seemed so much happier with them compared to how he was acting in front of her. Even his smile seemed genuine at that moment. He really doesn't think of me as a friend anymore. Excruciating reality settled down her heart. It was hard to digest, but she knew it was the truth and she couldn't change it, at least for now. Here, let me sign your watch instead, Suki-chan. Something inside her broke into pieces when Naruto called a girl with the suffix, chan. Chan, she whispered to herself, savoring the word as if it was the most valuable thing in the world for her. Chan. He used to address her with that. Sakura-chan. For a moment, She swore she saw a younger Naruto standing in front of her. He was calling out her name, and unlike the present Naruto's, his voice was full of love and affection. For a few seconds he stayed there, smiling and fidgeting at her, before vanishing with a gust of wind. Hollow. For the first time after a long time, she felt hollow as her eyes continued to punish her by looking at the source of her depression. Those girls were so close to him, even more than she had ever been. They were touching him, hugging him, and even ing him, but what surprised her the most was Naruto's face. He was happy with them. There was no sign of distress on his face now. The uneasiness that he carried in his voice while talking to her was gone too. He is really comfortable around them, she thought, her delicate mind withering by each passing second. Touch. She yearned for his touch again, but unfortunately, he longer cared about her wishes. Now he was more concerned about his fangirls, and she couldn't even blame him for that. It was her mistake after all. She was the one who left him alone and vulnerable to the charms of these fangirls. If not for her stupidity, he would have always been hers alone. Naruto-sama, let me you on the cheek, please. Ah. Her mind was going numb, she could feel it. The scene in front of her was becoming too much to handle. It was torture, a living reminder of how she left the only person who loved and cared for her alone. Ah! She gasped as a sharp pain erupted inside her brain. It was painful, but less than what she was witnessing just now. She tried to call him when another painful wave swelled inside her mind, but stopped at the last moment as she realized that she couldn't tell him about this. It was her punishment and she had to endure it all by herself. Goodbye. Naruto finally waved goodbye to his fangirls and sighed in satisfaction. Phew. They never forget to embarrass me in front of everyone. He giggled at his own stupid joke and turned around to enter the fabled Hokage tower. Let's go and see Ba-chan, Sakura. He murmured. Sakura. Sakura. He blinked when he received no answer from the girl again. Looking around, he tried to discern the reason for her abrupt silence, but whatever he was hoping for, her sweat-covered face was not included in the speculations. Sakura. He yelled at her in concern. You are sweating a lot. The concern in his voice might have made her happy earlier, but right now she was in too much pain to notice it. Naruto. Darkness finally claimed her vision as she went unconscious. Naruto's brilliant blue eyes stared at the girl in front of him with mild interest and worry as he tried to digest the new piece of information he had just acquired from his village's leader. So, you are telling me that she has been suffering from severe depression for a long time now. He finally opened his mouth and looked at his senior for answers. Tsunade, who was sitting idly on her chair, nodded her head grimly and smiled at the boy. There was no reason to hide anything from him anymore. Furious as they might be at each other, Naruto and Sakura were still best friends. They still cared about each other, and that Tsunade could tell by just looking into their eyes. Yes, Naruto, she answered shortly. And you are telling me this now? She told me not. Whatever Tsunade was about to say died in her mouth as Naruto silenced her with a seething glare, one that could have made Sasuke tremble in fear. And you agreed. At her slow nod, the glare on Naruto's face magnified. Why, she is my friend. I have every right to know about her health. He shouted at her, completely losing control over himself for a second. Friends? I thought you both broke up that bond after the war. Am I missing something here, Naruto? Tsunade wasn't fazed by the outburst of her subordinate. Instead, she was actually happy to see that Naruto still held his friendship with Sakura in high regard. Broke up? PFF'd. I never broke the bond with her. It was Sakura who began to act like an idiot for a while and stopped talking to everyone. Oh. Naruto looked away from her and turned his eyes over to his friend who was still lying unconscious on the couch. How serious is her condition right now? His lips trembled a little as he saw the painful state of her face. It was covered in sweat and minor wrinkles which were screaming at him, holding him responsible for everything Sakura had been through. Wait, Tsunade paused and immediately turned to the pile of documents on his table. After scrambling for a few minutes, she finally found what she was looking for. Here, she's the report for a second before handing it over to Naruto. She is doing fine, Naruto. Just a mild discomfort here and there, nothing serious though. She told the boy who was scanning the report with utmost importance. Then why did she faint like that? I don't know, Naruto. Then who does? Naruto almost screamed at her but controlled himself quickly as there was no reason for him to be mad at her. Tsunade was just doing her duty. I'm sorry for yelling at you Ba-chan, but this whole thing is messing with my mind. At one moment Sakura was talking normally to me and those girls, but at another she fainted all of a sudden. Tsunade blinked in curiosity. Fangirls? She asked him, and at his awkward confirming nod, she continued. She was standing there beside you and your fangirls? She asked as a serious expression covered her beautiful vibrant face. Don't call them fan. Shish. Tsunade stopped him as she immediately understood the reason behind the current state of her student. Sakura must have seen him talking casually to those fangirls. Of course, it's the only reasonable explanation. She thought. Otherwise, there was no reason for Sakura to be so upset that she literally had a stroke. What? Turning her eyes to the front, she glanced at an uncertain Naruto, speculating whether or not she should tell him about it. On one hand, he would finally get to know the reason for Sakura's current state, but on the other hand, he might start hating her more for her selfishness. After all, it was Sakura who shoved him away from herself after the war. It was all her mistake. Nothing. She must have had a minor stroke. In the end, she chose not to disclose the secret. When the time comes, her student would tell him herself. Tsunade was certain of that. Naruto, who was observing his leader intently, knew she was hiding something from him. It was written all over her face, and when it came to lying or hiding her arousal, Tsunade was the worst of all. She couldn't hide anything from him of all people. That's how bad of a liar she was. Is she taking her medicines properly? He asked, trying to change the course of the discussion. I hope so. A surprised gasp almost left his mouth at the absurdity of the statement. What do you mean by, I hope so? The tone of his voice changed and the harshly spoken words sent shivers down Tsunade's spine. I mean, I can't look after her all the time. I'm the Hokage of this village, Naruto, and I have certain duties to fulfill every day. Naruto calmed down. Tsunade was right. Her duty as a Hokage came before anyone's health. It was not like she could let the village's problems thrive while she took care of her students. I see. Still. Tsunade cut him off. I know, Naruto. That's why I am igning a medic to her right now. He will make sure she remains calm and collected. Rosy lips curved upwards in mirth as she saw the expression on Naruto's face change drastically. Wait. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise as soon as he realized what his leader had just said. A male doctor? Sakura was being a male doctor to look after her. What do you mean by, Naruto? Tsunade asked him, the mirth still lingering on her beautiful face. I mean, is Sakura going to be okay with a male doctor? He immediately responded with a question of his own, totally trying to sound as serious as he could. She has a very bad history with males, you know. The argument was good, but he knew his leader already had a rebuttal ready for him. His presumptions were confirmed when the voluptuous Hokage smiled at him. You got a nurse to look after you when you were in pain, Naruto. So, what's the problem with Sakura getting a nurse of her own? Now that rendered him speechless. The amount of hypocrisy he felt rising in himself was astounding. Foe.